and then given that a lot of the how the U.S. deals with Ukraine, Iran, China, given that a lot of this depends on this, I guess, internal struggle within the U.S. Do you see the America firsters coming on top here, or if you assess, for example, what's happening in Ukraine, and also, do you think this is part of the reason behind the confusing rhetoric? Because if you're Trump, you can't. Let's say you do want to end the Ukraine war, and I do think that he does. He can't be too open about it. I mean, for example, with Reagan, I think he was the only one who will be able to actually begin negotiating an end to the Cold War, because no one would accuse him of being soft. I mean, if you expose yourself as being weak, then the others come for you. So often it's only the hawks which are able to, I guess, properly negotiate with the opponent. So, but from his perspective, is a lot of this back and forth, belligerent rhetoric? Is this just always personality, or do you see this being tied into the need to keep some of the hawks at bay? Because a lot of this appears, as you said, it's not one united entity. There's a lot of internal struggles within America.
I do believe so, Glenn, and I can't be sure because the rhetoric is obviously part of the psyops, and the nature of psyops is that it has to keep the public disoriented and confused. So nobody can say like, well, this is exactly what they're doing, and I know this because they put it in this document.
Yeah.
Some of the most important decisions that are ever taken are never put down on paper. So, whatever somebody wrote somewhere in some document may or may not form the foundation for policy, but there will always be decisions that are taken in closed circles, where somebody decide, okay, we're going to be dropping Ukraine. That's it. They're not going to issue a press release for that. They're going to tread, like a course of giving themselves justifications, because they're always going to be attacks from the other side. Oh, you're abandoning our traditional allies.
Yeah.
And those traditional allies are very powerful. They control the media. They control so many of these institutions that are practically culturally entrenched in the American society. Back in the beginning of World War II, the British were deliberately inviting German attacks, the bombing attacks. And Winston Churchill was saying to the American ambassador, well, when the Germans start bombing our cities, you Yanks are not going to be able to sit back and let us be bombed, because, some of these towns bear the same names as towns in the United States. This is like Hitler bombing you in indirectly. So they understand, there's an entrenched mindset in the American political establishment, and as well, and also in the cultural traditions of the last, through the whole post World War II period, where ordinary person in the street thinks of the United Kingdom as an American friend and ally. Same for France, Europe, the European Union. So you can't just push them overboard, say, I'm not with these people anymore. I'm going to drop Ukraine. I'm going to be friends with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, because Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping has been demonized in the Western media nonstop since the beginning. I mean, Vladimir Putin has been in power since 2000. It was only in about 2003 that the Western powers understood that Putin was not Zelensky, that he was not Boris Yeltsin, that he intended to defend Russian sovereignty. But since that time on, he has been demonized in Western media 24/7, nonstop. There's, it's hard to find even a moderately balanced approach to explaining Vladimir Putin. And so, Trump can't just say, well, I'm going to make best friends with all these evil dictators like Putin and Xi Jinping and the mullahs sitting in Tehran. So the rhetoric, I think, has to be disorienting and confusing, which is why I try to actually ignore the rhetoric and then focus on what actually gets done and what are the effects of the policy. And I think that we also have a good precedent for that, which was from Donald Trump's first term. We had the evolving relations with North Korea, which started with very ugly rhetoric. You thought at one point that Trump was on the verge of launching an attack against North Korea. But at the very same time, he sent a delegation of his, from the Pentagon. I think it was high-level military generals who went to China and I think to South Korea and Singapore to prepare the terrain for a meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un. And they had a meeting and they ended up having a very good relationship. And Trump announced that, that they're friends, that the relationship will improve. And his objective was to end the hostility between North and South. And then for the first time since the Korean War, we had South Korean and North Korean troops demining the demilitarization zone. Of course, this was all derailed very quickly. But we had, let's say that we had a window of time when there was really high hopes that the Korean Peninsula was going to be pacified for permanently. The rhetoric was one thing. The actual policy was something else. And I think that it's for the same reason that we have crazy and chaotic rhetoric going on today. But we need to focus on the results and on the effects of Trump's policy. And I think that so far, I give him the benefit of the doubt for sure.
I was gonna say it's very interesting take though. Because people keep referring to the rhetoric that you have to look beyond the noise, and so I'm always wondering. Well, I guess might be the purpose to make you keep guessing. But if there's some order in the chaos, or if it's just if there's nothing there, but as you said, there is certain consistency, at least in terms of Project Ukraine. So it does appear that, well, if you look beyond all the back and forth, what really has happened is that the Europeans have been sidelined. The Ukrainians increasingly, keep in mind that they weren't even going to talk to the Russians. And now they're sitting at the table. They're increasingly going towards that format. The war, I guess, will now come to an end. The Europeans are taking over responsibility. So everything that he wanted is coming, and also, of course, the internal rivalry in the United States, the very powerful forces who won't let him walk away from the Ukraine war. They are also pacified to some extent. So again, I'm not sure if he's excellent at statecraft or he's just stumbling around and this is happens by coincidence. So I would like to think there's there's skill behind here. But
Yes, and I think that we also shouldn't neglect the fact that the war in the Middle East didn't escalate in the way that I think the war hawks hoped that it would. In spite of the Americans bombing Iran, and then Iran launching a token retaliatory attack, it didn't escalate from there. And I think that took deliberate action, because if you just let things go by their inertia, the war would have escalated for sure. So it seems to me there's definitely someone behind Trump, and maybe Trump himself, that is trying to steer the ship away from war and towards something else. And so we'll see. They could get derailed. He might fail because I think if I could issue a serious criticism to Trump, he is too promiscuous with truth. I think that he did himself a disfavor by claiming that he completely demolished Iran's nuclear program, because it's a lie that's too easy to debunk, or at least it's too easy for one side of the political spectrum to say, no, it's not true, you're lying. Had he said, we have inflicted severe damage on the program, and now we will push the Iranians to allow our inspectors to verify, you would give yourself a few weeks or maybe even a few months where you could let that story kind of die away, move away from the radar screen. And under cover of these inspections, you could still negotiate and do deals with the Iranians. But if you go with such a completely bombastic lie, then a lot of people are just simply not going to believe you. And then the pressure to go back to bombing and to renew hostilities is going to start mounting immediately. So I think that in that sense, maybe he's making a mistake, but it's hard to judge. It's very easy to be the backseat driver, criticize what is being done. I think we have to just wait and see what happens. But at least we don't have a major nuclear confrontation going on in the Middle East, which is what the war hawks, I think, wanted, and they still want it.
Because this word, I mean, he's really stuck on it. I saw him, bashing CNN because he said it's not severely damaged, obliterated. This is the word, obliterated. So he wants his something everyone can agree on. He's a great salesman. Like, he does the showmanship. I mean, this is his thing. And this word, I think promoting it is very important. It's
very important
because
and the
accept
reason
that there's no nuclear program. Yeah.
Yes, the reason why he's insisting on this word is because Iran's nuclear program has been the justification for going to war against Iran, for bombing them. And so if you say that the thing is obliterated, now there's no justification. And, the Western powers, since, we're all about democracies and human rights and freedom, we can't openly say, well, actually, no, we want to democratically impose a new regime on Iran, and we want to install our Shah there at the point of a gun. So by saying that he obliterated it, he completely removes the pretext for war against Iran.